Get started here. Welcome everyone. Today we are going to talk about the actionable steps that you all from operators, shippers, merchants, retailers, manufacturers, and distributors can take to strengthen your supply chains from the first mile to the last. But before we begin, let's dive into a few housekeeping items. First, throughout this webinar, if you have any questions or need further clarification on a topic, please post your questions in the Q&A area. There's a little tab at the bottom of the screen that says Q&A. You can post them in there. We're going to do our best to answer all the questions that come in. If we don't answer them live because we don't have time, we promise to follow up after the webinar. We'll make sure everyone's questions get answered. We won't have enough time today to cover every relevant area. But we are going to do our best to make this as comprehensive as possible. If you'd like to get in touch with our teams, don't hesitate to reach out on the ShipHawk.com website. There's a Let's Talk button that you can use, or on SourceDay.com, you can use the Contact Us button. That's the fastest path to a real person or a warehouse expert that we can get on the line with you to dive into whatever need you may have. We're happy to point you in the right direction, even if it's not one of our solutions. So let's get to it. I'm excited today to be joined by an industry veteran and close colleague, Tom Kieley, co-founder and CEO of SourceDay. Good morning, Tom. Tom and I are going to cover several topics. First, we're going to define what is meant by the first mile and the last mile of the supply chain, because depending on the company and the industry and where in the supply chain you're working, those things can mean very different things to different people and different businesses. Then we're going to move into the current state of operations. We're going to talk about stories that we're hearing from the companies we're talking to on a daily basis from our perspectives. And then from there, we're going to transition into what's possible. More importantly, where you can get started, what you can do to get started, and what you can do to get started right now. And then we'll close with the Q&A, and we'll do our best to get all the questions answered. So with that, I'd like to introduce Tom, who co-founded and leads SourceDay. Tom, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, appreciate the time, Jeremy, and excited to be here with you today. My co-founder and I, Clint McCree, launched SourceDay in 2015. My background has primarily been in and around software for enterprise organizations. SourceDay is my second startup entrepreneurial journey. The first one being consumer focused, which is now actually pivoted into enterprises. But before that, I was a supply chain background and engineering degree from Texas A&M, and went into Dell for a career in supply chain and then into sales. But fast forward, my co-founder and I met, and his background in supply chain and experiences in running a manufacturing organization for 10 years led us to come together and launch SourceDay through our passion of supply chain and enterprise software. Quick high level, SourceDay is it's just a B2B SaaS or cloud platform that orchestrates the collaboration between the procurement organizations and their suppliers of direct materials, really ensuring for manufacturers, direct to consumers and retailers that their parts and materials show up on time and, most importantly, in full. So that's kind of a quick high level of where we came from, and I'll hand it back over to Jeremy and introduce yourself and tell us about how you came to start ShipHawk.
Yeah. Jeremy Bodenhamer, I'm the co-founder and CEO of ShipHawk. And I actually bought a little failing pack and ship store in Santa Barbara and built it up to be one of the top performing stores of its kind in the US. And my phone was ringing off the hook with customers asking me one question, which is, what is the cost? No one knew what the shipping cost was. Everything was going online. Margins were eroding. This was long before there were e-commerce 3PLs. I had storage containers lined in the back alley behind my little retail store doing store pick, pack, and ship for all these up and coming e-commerce brands. And we started ShipHawk as a tech-enabled brokerage, and then the customers basically demanded more of a modern TMS, and so we slowly built those products. And then today, or in 2021, we made our first acquisition. We acquired one of the best warehouse management systems on the market. ShipHawk is the only TMS and WMS that's unified across the entire tech stack, meaning it'll work in your e-commerce cart, across the ERP, or the WMS. And as everyone on this call probably knows, TMS is just a fancy name for shipping software. So ShipHawk builds the solutions, the software that run the entire fulfillment lifecycle of an order. Today, ShipHawk software is run in between 600 and 700 distribution centers across North America. And then also I am the author of Adapt or Die, your survival guide to modern warehouse automation. And there's some awesome stories in there. So I encourage everyone to check that out. If you want a copy, you can get one from our sales team. We'll send you one on us, or you can find it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. And with that, let's jump in. And let's start by defining what is meant by the first and the last mile of the supply chain. Most operations have a need to break their supply chain into components for optimization. And the companies that need that are usually running an ERP. In this case, those components are going to be the first mile, the middle mile, the last mile. And the ERP, which is like NetSuite, Acumatica, SAP, Dynamics, to name a few, is the system of record or data hub that most of these scaling companies are using. It's the software that's frequently used to connect all the other software into one cohesive data set. ERPs are great at some things and not so great at others. And that's why companies like ShipHawk and SourceDay exist and why we're here today. So we're going to look at two specific areas where traditional ERPs are not super strong: procurement and fulfillment. In this case, I'm using these terms in the broadest possible sense. Procurement and fulfillment are often put along with other supply chain needs on the back burner, meaning they're someone's side projects, those projects that companies think we'll get to them when we have time. But let's be honest, if you're a growing company, nobody ever has time, right? Our goal is to change that perspective and to illustrate how vital efficient procurement and optimized fulfillment really are to a business and to the business's end customer. So on the procurement side, SourceDay's solution ends when a supplier has POs and ASN, advanced shipping notice, and when the virtual shipments have been assigned. Everything before that is where SourceDay handles. And then on the fulfillment side, ShipHawk picks up from the receiving of products into the distribution center through to shipping, tracking, returns, basically every inventory and fulfillment action that takes place within the four walls of the warehouse. So, Tom, why don't you start by defining procurement for us and talk about what some may view as the very first mile of the supply chain?
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. And it's an interesting question. When we first launched SourceDay, and still in some verticals today, we have a lot of education to do. When people think of procurement, they generally think of what's better known as indirect procurement, which is really, the equipment and office supplies, travel, T&E, expenses, things that go into normal day-to-day operations of an organization, more known so as P2P or procure to pay. In procurement for our world and what we've created in the first mile of the supply chain, most importantly, is a space that's been left really around Excel, email, and manual processes after the ERP or better known as the MRP creates the demand for the direct materials or the cost of goods that go into a finished product that get to a customer, whether it's an enterprise business or a consumer. So procurement for our world and for our intents and purposes is really it's direct material spend or cost of goods that are the parts, pieces, materials, packaging, everything that goes into delivering a finished product. And our customers range all the way from apparel, health and beauty, all the way to big industrial equipment manufacturing, transportation, automotive, et cetera. And that's really the procurement in the sense that we mean it.
Very good. So on the ShipHawk side, let's look at the last mile or the fulfillment process from the perspective of the warehouse then, because I think Tom's done a good job of covering it, kind of what happens before that point. Historically, there has been an insufficient focus on the warehouse and on operations in general. Walk into a bookstore, find one online, you're going to find countless books on sales and marketing, the space, what we call in front of the buy button, but almost nothing on operations, which is the space behind the buy button. We have best workplaces awards for the world in front of the buy button, right? Those offices in front, but not best warehouses awards for the warehouses behind the buy button. And in fact, there are ERP admins at most companies, but not for procurement or fulfillment. In fact, ops teams have to focus on both operations and the software to support them, both at the same time, right? If you look at our own ShipHawk database, we have hundreds of customer and prospect contacts in our database with NetSuite in their job title, meaning it's some sort of NetSuite admin. I have never seen one with WMS or ShipHawk in their title. There's really been no such thing as an ops system admin, despite the fact that this is a critical business system. Have you seen one of those, Tom?
No, absolutely not. I couldn't have said it better.
It is clear that most businesses are still not treating operations with the same level of importance as they are the world in front of their buy buttons. To survive and thrive, they have to bring that level of seriousness to operations. I had an operations leader from an e-commerce retailer reach out to me last week for help. He had read my book. He was overwhelmed with what was going on in his operation, and he was wondering where he should start. And so we got together, and I shared a story with him about Bite toothpaste. It's a D2C e-commerce brand. And before I share the story, I want to be clear. I don't know this company, this merchant, through business. I know them personally, and I think their story is super helpful, and that's why I want to share it. So if you go to the sustainability tab at the top of the Bite toothpaste website, you're going to see a section about why the founder started the company. She was fed up with all the trash in the environment, all the plastic waste in the ocean, and she wanted to do something about it. Scroll down further, and you're going to see a section on sustainable packaging. Below that, you'll see my favorite part. She has an entire section on slow shipping. Their site says right up front, deliveries may take a little longer. Why? Because slow shipping is better for the environment than fast shipping. They have turned slow shipping into a feature, and customers love it. They've made this part of their identity, part of their DNA. So why am I telling you a story about a toothpaste company? Because when the operations team at Bite goes into the warehouse to make decisions, they know what their North Star is. They know what packaging to buy. They know what shipping services to optimize for. They know how to optimize costs. This is an example of a brand making operations a priority. This world within the four walls of the warehouse covers everything from receiving, put away, the optimization and flow of the goods and workers in the warehouse, the picking, packing, shipping, tracking, returns back to the DC, where the process starts all over again. This is the battleground where Amazon waged war on every independent retailer, manufacturer, and distributor. And it's the battleground that we have to take more seriously. This is operations. Back to procurement, though. Once the goods have been procured, ShipHawk takes over. This is usually at a stage where the goods are received into the warehouse and where the execution of the inventory and fulfillment actually begins. But before I go deeper down that rabbit hole, Tom, why don't you talk about the current state of procurement management and what companies are doing today to manage their procurement processes internally?
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. I love that story and the context. Going off the topic just a bit here, one of the things in that vein that I always speak to investors and analysts about is really the concept of, the buying organization of these manufacturers, distributors, retailers, direct-to-consumer product organizations, really being the unsung heroes that do the first mile and last mile and make sure they hero to get customers' orders there on time. And in some cases, not at the lowest cost, right? They try to do the best they can and have to kind of do a significant amount of that heroing. So the current state of procurement around that effect really truly is, every customer that we speak to before they're adopting SourceDay, they're truly living in manual processes. They're living in Excel sheets. They're living in email, phone, chasing suppliers down. We've even still seen customers using fax for some of their other suppliers that are even smaller and don't have the technology. This really leaves buyers solely reactive to supplier misses that then impact the entire organization and potentially risk losing customers to competitors, especially in this world where it's become much easier to go find the next vendor or producer of a finished good or product or otherwise that you can go get when your original choice couldn't ship it on time or couldn't get you the product you wanted. So, all of this really is data that comes out of the ERP. in ERPs like Oracle, SAP, Microsoft, Epicor, Infor, NetSuite, all of them, right? They all have incredible platforms and rich data. The problem is they're all looking internally at their inside organization. They don't communicate or collaborate with the outside world, the trading partners that these organizations as product manufacturers, distributors, and retailers rely on to meet their customer goals, their revenue goals, and really deliver on their North Star, whatever that may be in the product world. So the day in life of a buyer is really customers managing thousands to tens of thousands and even hundreds of thousands of PO lines in a very manual way. We just got new data, this is fresh as of this morning, that shows 67% in 2022 of our customers' PO lines experienced 1.5 changes, with many of them experiencing over 6 to 12 changes before the product or material or equipment ever shipped to the manufacturer, distribution, retailer. Those changes, without managed in a process or in a system or in a single source of truth, represent significant risk. So, the state of procurement today is really manual. It leaves heroing. It continually leaves customers in our world really reactive to how they can manage their customers' needs and really chasing suppliers. And then it also impacts suppliers. Suppliers are also now having to hero and get things out the door with very little information and very little time to go react and make those things happen. So, for our customers, it's hard for them. They don't have the data to measure because it's in Excel and email and in the user's head or handwritten notes. So they can't react or produce really the results they want because they're not measuring it. And all of that really leads to incredible manual processes and just a significant amount of gaps and risk in delivering a finished product at the lowest cost to your end customer. So, with that, Jeremy, how do companies speak to you and address their fulfillment processes today on the shipping side?
Yeah, back to that brunch or breakfast I had with that operations manager, because the question's like, where do we start, right? And I think the challenge here is let's look at everything going on and in the opportunities before we even look at like where we should start, right? Start with shipping. Most B2C businesses are losing somewhere between 2 and 5% of their net sales on shipping expenses. They may still be using micro business software, even though they've scaled well beyond its initial and intended use, right? Those micro business shipping solutions, inventory solutions, legacy software, they are very expensive to operate when it comes to labor. This is frequently an overlooked cost. So most businesses are not just struggling to hire workers, retain workers, but their labor costs are frequently much higher than they should be because the software they're running and the workflows they're running in their DCs necessitate a lot of labor to run them. To make matters worse on the labor side, 55% of warehouse managers report that labor scarcity is one of their top problems. We've had prospects on the phone that have told us, hey, I've got 5 interviews today with warehouse workers. I've got 10 interviews today with warehouse workers. We'll talk to them the next day. And they're like, well, how many showed up? 1, none. It's bananas, right? Labor costs already make up 65% of most facilities' operating budgets. And get this, even with that high cost, 25% of workers describe themselves as actively disengaged at work, and over half say that they do just enough to get by. I'm not sure if you saw the internal Amazon memo that leaked late last year, but Amazon is predicting that they are going to completely exhaust the supply of warehouse workers in North America by the end of 2024. That's next year. In addition to being hamstrung with limited labor availability, its high costs, the rampant disengagement, merchants are also rarely able to repurpose the people that they do have because systems that they're running are so complex or specialized, meaning they can't easily take a worker from one area of the warehouse, move them to another area of the warehouse, and where they can operate just as effectively. And these problems exist far beyond shipping and labor. Let's look at packaging. 40% of the shipments are shipped in boxes that are too big, meaning we're paying to ship air, right? Shipping carriers use dimensional pricing to calculate shipping, which can add 25% or more to baseline shipping costs. And we can go over to warehouse space, where even with the depressed market, even with the news of Amazon giving up their warehouse space, right, left and right, it's still incredibly difficult to find space. I read an article last year that said the US needs to construct new construction, 1 billion square feet of warehouse space before 2025 to keep up with pace of the demand for the space. And on top of all that, right, you've got manual processes, manual workflows that result in low throughput, limitations on scales, errors, inaccuracy, limitations on scale, not scales, errors, inaccuracies that are way higher than they need to be. So it's a far more complex question than just where to start, right? It's like with all this going on, it's just overwhelming. What are SourceDay customers doing differently, Tom, and where are they starting?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that context and question. I mentioned how our customers before SourceDay are living in Excel and manual processes and really left to hero. And I mentioned tens of thousands of PO lines, right? Last year, SourceDay processed over 10 million PO lines, with over half of those experiencing change in our platform. Now, if you imagine customers doing that without a platform, it's significant risk. So what we're delivering to our customers in the procurement or first mile piece of the equation is really a beginning portion of change management. Adopting technology, systems, and processes that are creating systems and processes for organizations to really optimize the trading of goods and information between their suppliers, trading partners, and their organization, giving their suppliers a better chance to deliver a better quality product and a better experience in the manufacturing process. So, our platform for our customers is automating and orchestrating the procurement of direct materials through systematic change management and workflows. So we're giving our customers a streamlined but customizable or configurable methodology that they can then prescribe to their suppliers and how to do business with them, giving them the ability to provide automated acknowledgements, PO change exception data, and dashboards and analytics around what changes are happening, and then how do they need to react to those changes as a supplier. And then suppliers get workflows and data automation that allows them to respond to new purchase orders, new changes, prices, dates, part revision numbers, et cetera, and really be able to be proactive in responding to those customer needs as they're changing as a supplier. So suppliers are giving a system and a tool that gets them outside of Excel and scraping PO PDF data and manually keying that into their ERP systems for sales order processing. And we give them the ability to have automation, flat file type, inbound input and export type data automation for bulk data transformation. So, Excel is not a collaborative platform. It's a static sheet of data that really doesn't allow you to collaborate or really have transformation between any other trading partners. So we're giving, through a cloud SaaS single instance multi-tenant platform or a network that enables thousands of suppliers to log in and manage hundreds or thousands of customers' data and purchase order demand, and vice versa. Customers can log into a single platform and manage all of the PO signals and inbound shipment signals from their suppliers in a single place. So we work all the way from PO acknowledgement, price data, change data, date change data, all the way through to creating a virtual shipment of what a supplier is committing to ship in a container, on a pallet, or in a series of boxes, so that receiving and procurement has greater visibility to what's coming inbound, and then that creates more accuracy. As a whole, that also gives our customers' ERP systems greater visibility into operations. Sales can communicate more effectively to their customers on when to expect finished goods and products to be delivered, enabling your customers to be able to have greater visibility and proactiveness into shipping and how they're going to ship, and lower cost modes of shipping so that they don't have to hero anything overnight to get to their customers. Also gives them, to your point, the ability to have packaging better prepared so they're not shipping air across the country and the world, and enables them to have better prepared, more accurate data for seamless fulfillment of customer orders, all the way from tiers 2, 3, 4 suppliers all the way through to the finished customer. So, with that said, Jeremy, where do you see the opportunity for companies to get started that are looking to improve order fulfillment and their processes around that.
You mean aside from buying ShipHawk? Just joking.
Yeah, and SourceDay, of course. Don't forget both.
Yeah. And I want to go back to what you said first before I answer that, because I think there's a really interesting point that gets missed a lot. You used words like customizable, configurable, and then collaborative. And I feel goofy giving you another C, but I'm going to give you another C because it's the right word, which is control. We forget that historically we have been at the mercy of the software, right? And a lot of what taking this specialized approach and segmenting the business into these different parts and looking at where the ERP can shine and really be strong and look at where it's not and where we need to augment really is about giving our team control so that we can run the business the way we see fit, make those changes on the fly. And that's what I heard you talking about. It's not just the efficiencies for the sake of, hey, I can do this with fewer clicks, with fewer people, right? Do it with fewer errors. It's, hey, my team is now in control, right, of that procurement process.
Absolutely.
On the shipping side, let's go back to Bite toothpaste because I want to start with this. It's just something that I think is overlooked a lot. It starts with the North Star, right? Where am I going to start, right? For Bite, we know it starts with slow, inexpensive shipping, recyclable, environmentally friendly packaging. Right? The brand needs a North Star to answer this question comprehensively. And it's different for every business, right? I don't know, like maybe you're shipping everything SurePost or SmartPost. Are your customers cool with that? Like, I don't know, right? I don't know what services they need. And I don't know what promise you're making, but that has to be the point or the tip of the arrow, right? From there, we can start looking at very practical things. And I saw a question come in. I'll answer this now, and then I can answer this question a little later on more specifically. The number one place I suggest that brands start is with identifying a single metric. Now, I went through this whole list of all these problems, all these areas we could get focused on or overwhelmed with. But 9 out of 10 of the prospects our sales team talks to, 9 out of 10 of the distribution centers we walk into have zero operational metrics or goals in place that they're running their business by. So I frequently suggest starting small, starting with one metric that's a good measure of results for your operation that speaks to your North Star, your customers, your team, whatever the priority is. So usually I'll see this as average cost per order that's normalized by freight type or channel. Right? If it's a smaller or mid-sized company, for example, parcel, average cost per parcel order, average cost per less than truckload order, or retail or wholesale down to the penny, right? I want to know how it's fluctuating, but to the penny. Or for larger operations, it's throughput. I rarely see it like a metric that's better to start with higher volume operations than throughput. Either measured by number of orders processed per day, per shift, per person, or revenue processed per day, per shift, per person. Is it really a win if I process, 10,000, $10 orders if I've got a bunch of $1,000 orders sitting there and I can generate that revenue and close those out and recognize that revenue? Once we've got the basic metrics established and reporting's accurate and consistent, and this is a lot easier than I think most think it is. A lot of questions come back. It's like, well, how do I access this data? And we have it. It's there. Like, people are drowning in data. We just don't know that it's all there, right? Get the FedEx invoices, establish a cutoff so you know how many orders come in each day, and you can say up to that cutoff, that's what I'm going to count. Like, simple things. We're not trying to boil the ocean here. But once we've got that, we can start focusing on other things like shipping costs or labor or packaging or service times. It's important to remember not only why customers buy from each brand from you, but what their expectation and the promise that's being set. And the fact that the largest companies on the planet not only set these expectations, but are actively changing them on a day-to-day basis. And so we've got to be cognizant of the promise we're making in light of those, and making sure our customers know what to expect and that's what we're delivering on and measuring. So with that being said, Tom, anything else you deem kind of super important here that we're missing in terms of places to start?
Yeah, I love that question that came in on the KPIs. it's shocking to me. We talk to customers that are, as small as 20 million a year in revenue to as big as 100 billion in revenue per year. And they all have one thing in common, is they don't have a good metric or, a North Star as to what does an efficient or a healthy supply chain look like to them. And, again, it goes back to the ERP. The number one challenge that I get behind all of that is they don't trust the data in their ERP. And specifically as it relates to first mile, they don't trust the demand or the MRP data, which is, what are the actual, expected receipt dates of items? What is the supplier committed to from a delivery standpoint, whether it's they've split lines into several shipments, or they've, split, purchase orders into several purchase orders into a single shipment across split lines. And you get very complex data sets that, they don't see this until it shows up at the dock. So then it comes down to, how do you prepare how to staff your docks? How do you prepare how to staff your assembly production lines or, fulfillment centers if you don't know what's coming inbound? So for me, and when I speak to customers and prospects, it's really, I think the number one metric, if I had to pick a single one, is on time, in full delivery. And that in full component is critical. It's okay in some organizations and some product lines that you don't have an in full order and you can partially ship piecemeal to your customers. But if you're building a bus or landing gear or fuselage or an automotive component, you need all of the components at once to fulfill and ship the completed product. You can't have it come piecemeal and ship a partially completed bus to a customer. Those are just not possible. And if you're shipping clothing or apparel or health and beauty, you can't leave a component or a material or a piece of the supply out of that manufacturing process or the end customer product. So for us, it's on time, in full delivery of suppliers, purchase orders, fulfillment. And that data today is, for the most part, from what I hear from customers, it's untrusted in the ERP because it's not being fed supplier side data. So I think that one metric can give you the data you need to know, where do you go spend your time as a procurement or operations organization in, suppliers or parts or components or commodities that are creating the most risk for your organization.
That's good. I like that. At the end of the day, all companies are going to have to make automation investments part of their DNA so they can drive better efficiencies in their operations from procurement through fulfillment. But remember, this is important. The average distribution center today stocks in excess of 18,000 SKUs, of which only roughly half, are able to be handled robotically, meaning that we are going to continue to have to invest in people on the front line in addition to these software investments. So they have to work in concert. So we got to invest in training. We've got to improve benefits in the operations side of the business, invest in the quality of the workspace, treat those in the back office like we do those in the front. I'd love to see a greatest warehouses to work at award alongside these greatest companies lists that we fawn over every year. The workers on the front line are going to be even more important to driving business results in the future than they are today, if not just because they're going to be so much more difficult to find and more expensive. Starting warehouse automation investments now allows businesses to adapt, lowers barriers to training workers, allows the workers they have to accomplish more, to be interchangeable, to run multiple workstations, right, with different fluctuations in business needs, and ultimately makes the business more scalable for the long run. So that being said, let's take a few questions. We've received some already. We're going to do our best to answer them. And if not, we'll make sure to get back to you after. But if you have questions or things we haven't covered or clarification, please, you can submit those now. Tom, let's start with a good one here. How do ShipHawk and SourceDay work together?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think first and foremost, as you joked earlier, right? You need both for it to work together and to really have a digital first and last mile supply chain. Otherwise, you're leaving those, workers that are strategic to your organization to burn out and, manual processes. So as I said earlier, ERPs are inside looking platforms with highly stale data sets. And that goes all the way from first mile procurement changes to all the way to last mile ShipHawk type data. So making the ERP more accurate for both procurement and fulfillment really drives a more intelligent end-to-end supply chain. So while there's not a deep demand or need for ShipHawk and SourceDay to be integrated together, it's because we're both tightly intertwined with the ERPs and the operating systems that our organizations that our customers use, right? So as an example, we're heavily integrated, I think mutually, both in NetSuite and in other ERPs like NetSuite, Acumatica and Infor and others that where we're both feeding data accuracy and real-time changes and visibility into those systems. So receiving more accurate and intelligent data gives better forecasting, better resource planning, tooling, and warehouse management. That ultimately, with a digital or digitized platform and a digitized supply chain, really lets your organization become more efficient and have better planning and systems and tools, automating more manual tasks across your entire organization. So ultimately, the long story rambling answer to your question, collaborating with other systems and tools for an overall more intelligent operation, feeding your inside looking ERP systems where you've spent tens or hundreds or even some cases millions of dollars setting those systems up and intertwining them deep into your processes, and then not letting them speak to the outside world of shipping, logistics, first mile procurement, and other data sets.
Yeah, and I would add to that, even not wholly relying on the native baked in inch deep, mile wide, solution that is trying to say it's everything to everyone, right? Recognizing what that ERP is good at, and as you're saying, Tom, leveraging the connections, the data with those other systems to get the best end result. Usually that, regardless of what the cost is to buy those products, it's usually far lower than the cost of not doing it the right way.
Absolutely.
That can be incredibly high. I'll take this next one at least to start, and then Tom, since I touched on it already, what are the most important KPIs for the first, middle, and last mile? So it's very hard to say universally for every operation that these are the most important, but if we're from the ShipHawk perspective, from the inventory fulfillment, shipping perspective, I would look at first mile important data being out of stock, right? What inventory is available to be sold? And if it's not in its place when it's needed, that would be a red flag for me for what's going on before that point. Middle mile, I would go back to throughput or cost per order. And then last mile, I would do delivery promise or SLA. Am I actually meeting that delivery promise? What % of the time, and what impact is it having on the customer? That's how I would look at it. Tom, what are your thoughts?
I think I mentioned my first mile metric earlier, right? It's on time and full as a key component or KPI for organizations that shockingly doesn't get tracked. The other one that I think is incredibly scarce or maybe truly just subjective is really from first mile all the way through last mile. How are you really scoring and judging the objective risk that your suppliers, including your freight, transportation, and last mile carriers, how are you grading those suppliers in terms of actual risk to the business, in terms of performance? There's supplier risk when you look at things, like financial, business stability, geographic locations, and really just the overall financial and operational health of those organizations. But how about just an actual action-based health metric of how are these suppliers, reactions to you and their responsiveness to you and their actual physical results to you impacting your business? So true supplier performance scorecards that are created based on objective, actionable supplier data and really truly supplier actions that drive those metrics in a non-subjective manner. So understanding the risk inside of your supply chain became incredibly critical during the COVID years, where organizations found themselves too reliant on single sourced components, where they just had complete breakdowns and had to go scramble to find second, third, multi-sourced suppliers for critical parts, and even really in some cases commodities where it became hard to find certain components. So understanding supply chain risk and health all the way through from first mile to last mile is probably the most critical in my eyes.
Yeah, it's a really good one. That ability to have accountability, so even easy access to that data, right? So especially when it comes to all those third parties that are relied on. Next one is, what future trends do we expect in the first miles of the supply chain in 2023, and what about the last mile? Tom, you want to start with this one?
Yeah, I'm going to stick with my trend on data. I think everyone always loves to talk about data, and everyone now is talking about AI and ML and chat GPT, right? All of those things are great. The most realistic and I think actionable kind of value behind data is actionable data. The ability to actually have real-time data that you can use both internally within your organization, but also share and give visibility and collaboration with outside your organization, with your trading partners, with your carriers and brokers that are fulfilling orders. And if you don't give suppliers, who are in reality partners, I prefer to have them called partners. They're not just suppliers to you. You can't do business without your suppliers. So, they are considered partners. Legal, terms don't like using the phrase partners and kind of a sense of partnerships in business. But, I think the reality is the way you do business as a finished product manufacturer, distributor, or otherwise, those suppliers enable you to, exist, and you need to treat them as partners. So by giving them actionable data and an ability to be more effective and perform at a higher level for your organization. And I think doing that with systems and tools and greater visibility to your demand, your forecasted demand, the real-time changes and PO exceptions and change data that are happening against your demand, and enable your suppliers or partners to be more effective in that. So I think, the biggest trend I hope to see, and I believe we're starting to already see, since COVID, is a heightened focus on supply chain and really using data throughout your supply chain, not just internally, to give all trading partners the ability to exceed your expectations as a customer. Because at the end of the day, you are their customer, and need to work together in a partnership to really do business better together.
Yeah, that was excellent. It's funny because you're talking about data availability, and I just was thinking about something that happened at the dinner table last night. My wife is the dean of students at the local high school, and some students are starting to cheat with chat GPT that you brought up. And my boys were fascinated, so we pulled out the iPad and we pulled it up. And what does my 10-year-old type in? He types in investment strategy for 10-year-old to become billionaire. So yes, the access to data is like it's never been before. But I would add something to your answer there, which is historically, we went from a world with no data, right, or difficult to access data, to a world where everyone is drowning in data, right? Like, we have all sorts of ways that customers can access information through ShipHawk. And a lot of times customers will call us and they'll be like, oh, I need this. We're like, it's right there. Right. And so part of what we're working on is making it even more in their face so that they can see it, putting it on regular reporting, sending it via email, putting it into slide decks, anything we can to get it front and center, because there's just so much of it now. And I think that a big trend in 2023 is going to be companies like ours are taking that data and trying to make it more apparent and more prescriptive. So it's saying, hey, we noticed this going on in your operation. We suggest, or here are some options, right? Or you might want to consider, and getting that front and center with the operations teams, so they're able to make all that data more actionable and applicable for what's going on in the operation at any moment in time.
I got to interrupt you, Jeremy. What was the answer to the $10 billion or $1 billion question?
It just wrote out this whole, like, it was like a political answer, meaning it was an answer that said not much, right? It was like, you should take your time and do unrisky investments and look at index funds and like all that type of stuff. It
sounds like my dad answered that question.
Yes, yes, that type of answer. Well, it looks like we've been answering questions. They've been coming in behind the scenes here and sending out some information. So I think we're good on questions right now. If we missed anything, please definitely reach out and let us know. Thank you everyone for joining us today. If you're interested in learning more, we're going to post some resources to help you. Tom, why don't you cover the resources you think would be most helpful for them about SourceDay?
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, our website, sourceday.com. Our CMO, Sarah Scudder, actually hosts a podcast weekly with experts in supply chain and technology. Incredible hosts, incredible guests every week. It's called What the Duck Supply Chain podcast. And also our YouTube page, SourceDay Tube. Some incredible content, not just all SourceDay, just customer stories and how to look at your supply chain in the digital future.
That's great. And on the ShipHawk side, ShipHawk.com, ShipHawk like the boat and the bird. We also are going to share the 10 competencies of best-in-class warehouses ebook. That's going to be posted here in the chat. So please look at that if you're interested. And then also, once again, my book, Adapt or Die, Your Survival Guide to Modern Warehouse Operations. We are willing to send that to you for free if you get in contact with our sales team. So hit that contact us button on the website, or feel free to go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble. You can find it at all your major book retailers. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Tom. Great to talk to you as always.
You as well. Thank you, Jeremy.